afternoon, whenever you're listening to this, welcome to the internet's most sophisticated wrestling podcast, discussing the weekly aspects of it all, right here on
the Bald Monkey Wrestling Podcast.
Episode 27. Episode 27. I want you guys to think about that for a second. Over half a year of recording the podcast at this point. It's pretty cool stuff.
I like it. It's been fun.
Yeah, exciting.
It has been fun. I think this is one of the things I enjoy the most. There's always so much fun stuff to talk about. Like Fox. Let's talk about Fox for a second. So Fox is going to put a show on FS1. It's like WWE Backstage or something like that. I might be getting the name wrong. Apologize to the people in the comments section if I get the name wrong. But so basically they're putting this program on. And I know that they have said that Renee Young is going to be on this program for sure. But a surprising name that looks like might be going on this show is CM Punk.
Ooh.
Yeah, the guy who never would come back, right? The guy who everybody chants at every single event as a joke, basically, that we want back in the ring. And then Fox is pulling a fast one and giving him a screen test and possibly bringing him on a WWE show. That's kind of crazy.
But if the dinero is right, he will come back, as would anybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, but it's coming back to do what though? Because again, Fox wants to treat wrestling as though it is a proper sport, and CM Punk is somebody who has dabbled in MMA because of him, I guess, enjoying the combat sports world. So it's more or less him being a host of a show that's going over fake combat sports world as if it were a real combat sports world. And even though it's for WWE, if it's a Fox show, it doesn't have 100% affiliation with WWE, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, but I think Punk has also softened his stance a bunch on the idea of returning to WWE. I believe we talked about it on this podcast in one of the early episodes about if he would ever show up on one of these shows. And, I still think he eventually will end up back in a WWE ring. This is his first step, right? Working not necessarily for the company, but working for an affiliate of, working for Fox for their backstage TV show. So they've brought in a bunch of people, not just Punk. They brought in a bunch of people for these screen tests. It's just, he is the biggest name, obviously.
And apparently he had a good screen test.
Well, yeah. What was he really good at all the time? Being on the mic, right? So, of course, he'd be good at it. It's not like it's a surprise that he'd be good at speaking. The surprise is that he is considering working for the WWE again. But I think through his trial and through the fact that he kind of got a bad rap here for what he did to Colt Cabana, I think he might be on his way back to WWE sooner than we think.
And it'll be interesting to see how, if he does come back, if they do offer that to him, how quickly in the fold he would become to storylines and actually start possibly wrestling again.
I think he'd end up wherever Heyman is pretty quickly, because I think Heyman would love to have him as a centerpiece on Raw. I think Raw is getting stripped of a lot of people here when Fox comes around. But again, to James's point, if Fox wants to be legitimate as a sport, then they want Punk on Fox.
And I've read a bunch of things where already, for the past couple of weeks, they've already been saying that Raw is no longer the A show. Smackdown on Fox is now the A show, and Raw is just the B show now.
Who says that? WWE or Fox?
I think Wrestling Observer had something in there. There were a bunch of other things that I was looking at that had it in there about that. But I was like, you can't not still have Raw be the number one show, no matter if SmackDown is on Fox. It like Chris said, I think last week or the week before, we all grew up with Raw as the A show, the go-to, the number one. And, it almost feels wrong to have SmackDown be, considered the A show now.
I don't think it will be. So SmackDown has been getting better over the years because it's seen as the second show and it was giving opportunities for guys, and the writing was a little more it wasn't as predictable as Raw was, right? And that's been the case with Raw for a while now. I think you're going to get a flip here. You're going to get a flip where SmackDown's going to become a bit predictable. Basically just putting the big names out there, trying to be big in advertising, and Raw's going to have the bigger opportunities. Raw's going to have the better wrestling. I think we're going to get a rebirth of Raw because of this. So it's going to kind of backfire for them, but it's going to benefit us.
Well, funny enough, you talk about them wanting certain people and them viewing themselves as the A show. Apparently Fox wants the Fiend. But wait a second, that doesn't make sense.
Everybody wants the Fiend, but yeah,
that's my favorite.
SmackDown?
Well, no, that's it. But regardless of whether it goes on SmackDown or not, I just think that's funny that Fox wants the Fiend, because it's like, oh well, we want it to be legitimate sports, but we want the Fiend because yeah, of course you're smart enough to know that the Fiend is literally the hottest storyline in wrestling.
Yeah, and I feel if he goes to SmackDown and be on Fox as like it would almost kill his character development and where his story arc is going, because he's not going to be able to do the same stuff that he does on, even though it's, USA, but he's not going to be able to do the same.
They're already killing his character arc though. And this is coming from
True.
I have been enjoying the hell out of the Fiend stuff, and they have still not pushed it too far. They have still not done the storyline a little bit too much or done the spots a little bit too much for me. I'm still enjoying them, but I'm getting more and more afraid every week because I don't know, man. I'm just not digging this whole title thing. This whole Hell in the Cell thing, it's got me a little bit worried. The only saving grace of Hell in the Cell and of him maybe winning a title is that they can immediately move people away from him.
I don't know, dude. I'm still at the point of why does he need the title? He doesn't need people chasing him. He needs to be chasing everybody else. There's no way you give him the title and it makes sense to me. But I'm trying to make sense of how do you get him out of that match without taking an L that makes, the character die, basically. You've already buried Bray Wyatt in the past. You can't bury the Fiend. There's got to be a way to surprise everybody that he disappears and somebody else appears in the ring, and that's how you end that match, where you kind of take a sidestep with the Fiend and he shows up. I don't know. He shows up with the Bludgeon Brothers or something later on in the night or earlier in the night. It's got to be later on in the night because there's no way they're gonna. Well, they got to have Hell in the Cell last, you would think.
Yeah.
I don't know. The fact that it's a Hell in the Cell match is what makes it alarming to me, because there's no out. There's no disqualification. There's no out for me. You could easily get an out where Rollins gets disqualified or something because he feels like he has to go over the edge to beat the Fiend or something. So that's why I don't understand they went straight to Hell in a Cell match with this. I worry because I'm not able to get my hands around a surprise. But then again, maybe they'll have something that's really surprising, which would be a great finish. But otherwise, if it's just Rollins stomping him, it's going to be bad.
I wonder, has the Fiend ever said anything actually about wanting the title?
No. That's the major point here, right? He's not after the title. He's after Rollins. So that's what makes it interesting, and that's why it's like if they didn't have the but if you don't have Hell in the Cell as the match, you have an out. But it's Hell in the Cell. What's the out? How do you not like? What does he do? Lose the match, but then comes just sits right back up and just beats the crap out of Rollins?
Yeah, he just has to destroy both of them and then just leave. I mean, it's the Fiend. Does the Fiend need to worry about winning a match or losing a match? I mean, if the match just abruptly ends, if the pay-per-view just ends with him having destroyed them and then they just can't do anything. I mean, the worrisome
Why do
thing
you keep
is
saying
this,
them?
right?
Yeah, who's them?
Who's them? Why do you keep saying them?
I don't know, because I feel like Braun Strowman's going to get involved in this match at some point. I feel like Braun Strowman's going to be in this match.
That's your out.
Yeah.
That's your out. If Braun Strowman's in the match, that's your out. The third
somebody
man
else
in the
in.
match brings a different pinfall aspect.
But do they dare have Rollins lose the belt on Raw the week before Hell in a Cell so that the match is literally just the Fiend against Rollins with no nothing to it, and it's just a revenge?
That's an interesting out.
It is the season premiere.
That'd be very surprising.
I agree. I'm just trying to look at all the different sides of what could happen.
And then, I mean, at that point, does Ray have to have a match at Hell in the Cell? Because it makes sense to get it off of Rollins for the pay-per-view, but then what do you do with Ray that weekend? You don't put him in Hell in the Cell.
Feed him to Bobby Roode?
I don't know.
Yeah, give him a fluffer match.
Man, that's a quick turn. Whew.
For Ray. I mean, you would think you would have him carry it for a little while, but I'm not sure how high.
Ray makes more sense on Smackdown anyway.
Mysterio.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
It's going to be interesting. I'm very interested to see what they do leading up to Hell in the Cell. I've said this 100 times. I'll say it 101. I don't think the Fiend needs to be a champion. I think everyone needs to be afraid of him coming after them, not the other way around. And I don't want him ever to be champion at this point. The Fiend just needs to continuously be the guy going around and scaring the crap out of people.
I also would love to see them after this Rollins thing is done. I would like to see them pull back on the Fiend just a little bit. He doesn't need to be on Raw 4 or 5 times throughout the night. But they're doing that because he's obviously the number one story, and it is, I think, getting them good ratings. But the problem is like they need to be subtle about it. You know, there's nothing wrong with having an episode of Firefly Funhouse every single night and then just not letting viewers know when it's going to come on. Like always have it come on between 10 and 11 or something like that.
I agree with that. It's a little bit heavy right now, but I think there's an end game. I just don't know. I don't know how much they're going to layer him into every story they can right now while they're trying to get ratings leading up to the premiere on Fox. I think they're just obviously trying to get it where everybody sees the Fiend and recognizes him as one of the biggest names on WWE right now. And they're milking it for all it's worth, which I don't know. I don't blame them for it.
Well, interestingly enough, I had messaged you guys earlier in the week with a video that was sent to me by one of our listeners. and she had sent me a video and said, I'm worried about the Fiend storyline or whatever. And it was basically a dark match spot after that Raw had gone off, and Rollins totally destroys the Fiend.
I don't know if he.
I don't
would
know if he
dispute that.
destroyed him.
Yeah.
I mean, Bray the Fiend got up at like right away. I think 2 times.
Yeah.
And then like the third time, it was still like he was like a little groggy, but I don't think he destroyed him. I mean, at first when you sent it to us, I was like, oh man, come on. And then like I thought about it more over the week, and I was like, you know what? I don't mind it. It's after the fact. Yeah, it gets on the internet, but I mean, it's kind of one of those things. I mean, they've done that kind of stuff a million times, WWE, in those dark matches, and house show stuff, even though, the house shows are a totally different animal. But it is what it is. They wanted it to get, all the people in the seats there to make them feel happy about Seth Rollins. They're a number one guy.
But what's funny when you watch that video is you can hear a girl in the background say, I don't know who to root for.
Yes.
And
that was so great.
And so my counter argument to what you just said about, they're Rollins or whatever is like, everybody loves the Fiend. He's the bad guy that everybody loves. So, okay, let's pump one more rumor into the Fiend, though, before we get off of him until we talk about him on like the main show or whatever. And that is there's a lot of people talking about the fact that Liv Morgan might be teaming up with the Fiend at some point.
I mean, I love the idea. I mean, I love bringing Liv back, but I don't know how that fits into a storyline right now. I mean, you bring her back at Hell in the Cell? You bring her back to interfere somehow? Does she hit Rollins with something and that's how the match ends without even a pin? And they just stand over Rollins and the lights go out and disappear? I mean, that would be an interesting out to not make the title change hands, but yeah. I think we've all been on board with Liv coming back with some kind of character like that. We've all been on board with somebody joining the Fiend. It makes all the sense in the world with her Harley Quinn kind of character. I don't see it. I don't know. Are they doing things too quickly? Are they pushing these stories too fast because of Fox?
I don't know that I'm going to ever say that they're pushing, well, at least not at this point, say that they're pushing this Fiend story too much. Because when I think about it, I think, well, you have this interesting opportunity where he has all of these puppets, all of these characters that he surrounds himself with, that he's kind of the quote-unquote master over. And what if you then personified those characters with actual, you take those characters and you put actual wrestlers in their places.
It would be great. I mean, I think we've talked about that before, like when this first kind of happened, when this first kind of started with all the puppets. And
I mean, what if Liv Morgan came back with like jet black hair and she was Abby the Witch?
How many times have we decided who was going to be Sister Abigail?
Yeah, exactly.
How many different people we were like, ooh, this person, ooh, that person.
The interesting thing, though, is there's been a lot of things that we have talked about we've talked about them a little bit over this half year, but like as friends who just talk about wrestling, we've talked about for a long time. And there's a couple of them recently, you talk about that CM Punk thing, that kind of, I'm going to say that kind of counts as something that we've talked about before that's actually kind of coming to fruition. And another big one that happened this week is that John Morrison re-signed with WWE.
Well,
rumored to re-sign.
Rumored.
Yeah.
because
rumored?
Pretty
he
big,
came out and then was like,
pretty confident rumor, but yeah.
yeah, he came out and then said, hey, I don't know if it was Wrestling Observer or somebody, but he was like, hey, let me know when I sign to
AEW or ROH,
AEW
yeah.
or Ring of Honor.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
okay.
I mean he's playing it off, but yeah,
Yeah.
I mean obviously something we've talked about a bunch. Obviously something Jimmy would be super excited about,
Dude, I'm such a
and
huge fan.
obviously a storyline that fits perfectly in with the Miz, fits perfectly in with what Shinsuke and Sammy are doing. It's very obvious that here you go. Here's who you bring in to help the Miz out because it's a 2-on-1 with Sammy, and Sammy's consistently helping Shinsuke win matches. So it makes all the sense in the world. And I think it would be perfect on Fox again because I feel like he made a big name for himself on SmackDown back in the day, either with Miz or by himself. So it's a great signing if they got him.
I would just absolutely love this signing, and I would love in particular, although if he's on Fox, you can't really do this as probably as well, but the thing about John Morrison is that when he left and then he went and he did his other promotions, in particular when he did Lucha Underground, he was just a garbage, just like piece of crap on Lucha Underground. And that character was so great. He can play such a good flippin' heel, man. And my second question would be this. If we're going to get John Morrison, and again, you say rumor, heavy-handed, probably accurate rumor, are we going to get his wife?
So she's not signed either, right?
So her name's Taya Valkyrie.
Yeah,
And she was on Lucha
signed
Underground too. I don't know. I'd have to double check. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm telling you, she's got moves. She's definitely no slouch.
She's been on. I feel like she's still the Impact champion, or I mean, I could be way off. I admittedly don't watch enough Impact to know what's going on. But I feel like she was the champion.
But we might have the opportunity to. I sent out a tweet.
There you go. There you go.
And I was just like sitting there, and I'm like, well, wait a second. WWE has been so focused on, contradicting AEW's Wednesday TV spot that Impact slid into the Tuesday time slot. So you have Raw on Monday, you're going to have Impact on Tuesday, you're going to have NXT and AEW on Wednesday, and then you're going to have SmackDown on Friday. It's like, goodness
seriously,
gracious,
man.
so
like
much wrestling.
No love for Thursday Night Thunder. I can't believe this. Like all week long we get wrestling and no love for Thursday Night Thunder. It's going to be pretty jam-packed for the week for wrestling. It's going to be hard to keep up with all that wrestling, but it's a good problem to have. It's a great time to be a wrestling fan. If you're not a wrestling fan right now and you're thinking about it, man, you're going to get a lot of wrestling here soon, and it's going to be a lot of good wrestling too.
According to Wikipedia, Taya Valkyrie is the current Impact Knockouts champion.
Nailed it.
Yeah, and it looks like she's also recently beat Tessa Blanchard. That's big. That's big,
impressive. Yeah. So yeah, she'll probably stick around there, and I mean they're taping everything down in Orlando anyway, so you could stay pretty close to WWE if you're, or I should say, stay close to her husband if they're in Orlando.
So
maybe he shows up on NXT. Man, he'd be a great
That'd be awesome
veteran on NXT, and he could have a hell of a singles run. And he can be that heel that you want him to be.
He could be a surprise coming out in the draft too for any one of the three shows.
Yeah,
that'd be interesting too. Yeah.
Last thing, and this is probably going to be maybe the only thing of AEW I mention, and it's not even mentioning that much. They were talking to Marty Scurll about the fact that his contract comes up in November and they were asking, hey, are you gonna go to AEW with your friends? And his response was, my friends are all dead. What the fuck is AEW?
They love playing that dead angle. Like they've been doing that with Cole for a long time, ever since he went to NXT. The ghost. But I think Marty needs to go ahead and stay on the independent, ride and do his Ring of Honor stuff. And I think he's making still a heck of a name for himself. I don't know that he needs to go to either AEW, WWE, but in the end, it's all, about making a living and getting that long-term contract. So I think he'll show up eventually, but I think he should wait it out and see kind of how this Wednesday night fight goes first.
Well, I think he needs to just create a new television show on Thursdays, Villain Thursdays. So
it's wide open, man.
I'm telling you. So here we go, beginning of this week, starting with Raw, and first real match of note. We have a little bit of interaction between Rollins and Strowman, in what I think is a pretty decent promo, I would say. Having, Rollins basically getting pissed off that Strowman's out there in the first place and being like, no, let's have a fight at the end of the night, which... The problem with the Fiend coming up, it kind of feels like a setup, which we'll see if it is when we get there. But the first match of note that we have is the Viking Raiders versus the OC.
Oh, yeah.
Exciting to see this, continuing on. They're finally giving the Viking Raiders some respect, and ultimate respect because they, of course, get the win.
Yeah, I'm happy to see them finally using them against real tag teams and not fake tag teams. But I thought it was a great match. I mean, it had everything. It had the Raiders up, it had AOC up, it went back and forth. I mean, I love the finishing move. Absolutely love it. And they've proven that they can pull it off with the jobber guys, which I mean, we could probably. And they've proven that they could pull it off with, guys that are a lot heftier.
The weird thing, because as I look at the next match after this, and I'm hanging on the Viking Raiders here for a second, but I'm looking at my notes here, and this whole jobber thing, I'm very torn on it because I think using jobbers is like these local jobbers isn't a bad thing, but we don't want them to be overused at the same time. So with the Viking Raiders, it was just like, okay, well, how many months in a row are we going to just see the Viking Raiders just destroy some random schlubs? Like, that's not good. But like setting the tone with the schmucklax is a little bit different, right? Like setting that initial tone with the schmucklax and then moving on and then building up and then saying, trying to like test the limits of those people that you're showing as being dominant. I think that that's important. And so I have a little bit of issue because we suddenly run this fight this week where you have EC3 being fed to Rusev.
Yeah.
And I'm confused.
By what?
Well, because I'm like, why not just feed Rusev a local jobber and then use EC3 like in one of the next weeks as like the next step up?
I don't even know that you need to do that. Like, what do you even get from the match? What do we need to see from Rusev that we haven't already seen? Like, what are you trying to legitimize with Rusev? It's different with the Viking Raiders because they're new to a lot of people. Rusev shouldn't be new to many people. So bringing him in for a squash match and whoever he's taking on, is it really doing anything? What are we buying? That he's a good guy? That he's a bad guy. I'm not sure what it even was supposed to build for us.
He's an American citizen.
Yes, congratulations.
Congratulations, Rusev.
It is officially Rusev Day.
It is Rusev Day every day in America from now on.
But his whole, like, since he's come back, like, both like things that he's been involved in have kind of made no sense. I agree with Chris. Like, everybody knows who Rusev is. He was, there for a while. He was a champion. He was in a tag team. Everybody knows who he is, so you don't have to like bring him back and be like, oh, hey, look, he can still wrestle. It just makes no sense. And the EC3 thing, I don't think WWE even knows what to do with him, because I mean, it's apparent they like barely ever use him. He's running around chasing the 24/7 title sometimes. I mean, I think he's had 2 matches like that have been on TV in the past 2 months.
He needs to go to NXT.
Yeah, it's very odd for a guy that we all know is a good wrestler, who we saw like 2 feet away from us at Royal Rumble in Philly, 2 years ago.
Yeah, it was exciting. It was exciting that EC3 was coming over for sure.
Yeah, and he's, I mean, big, big on the mic, really good on the mic, and I don't know that he needs any other character than the character they got for him right now, but he just doesn't fit into any of their storylines right now. So yeah, it makes all the sense in the world to send him down to NXT, give him some time down there. He could have a feud with just about anybody down there. I mean, he's not the best wrestler, but he could definitely hold his own. Just feeding him to the 24/7 championship or feeding him to Rusev makes no sense right now.
I'm thinking that WWE should have Maria Kanellis come out onto the stage and try to convince the audience that Ricochet is not in fact the father and Rusev is not the father, but they're actually both equally the father, if that's possible. And so that the baby that's going to come out of Maria Kanellis is going to be a high-flying Mr. Belvedere.
I love it.
I mean, just go for broke, man. I mean, if it's ridiculous, just go ridiculous to the nth degree and see if you can save it.
I love how Maury Povich was like, "Hey, I'll find out who the father is. We'll get down to it. Yeah, I'll come on Raw."
Yeah, maybe. Well, I think if Maury Povich came on to find out who the father was, the father would be Maury Povich.
That would be crazy.
If we want to add, since I talk about Kanellis though, I'm going to jump over to Smackdown for just a second. And
Chad Gable getting worked 2 nights in a row.
Chad Gable and Mike Kanellis fighting each other. And it being really weird because Kanellis was coming out and saying all these short jokes and stuff like that. But Mike Kanellis isn't much taller than Chad Gable.
No. But it doesn't matter. I mean, he's bigger than Chad Gable, so, it's okay.
It was a chance for them to feature Gable because Gable's getting a good push right now. Obviously, he had the match the night before with the now forever known as King Corbin.
Which was done correctly. That match was done very correctly.
Perfectly.
It was a great match.
It was done perfectly. Corbin's new entrance is awesome. His new gear is incredible. Mike Rome, I love the intro of King Corbin. You're welcome for me doing it for the last couple of weeks. I think entirely this is one of the best things they're doing right now next to the Fiend is King Corbin. I think he's going to go for a long time. But I get what they were doing with Gable, giving him kind of a squash match the next night because he's getting a big push. He's gonna lose to Corbin in these DQs or cheating, and then he's gonna show up and have these successful matches as a face on SmackDown because he's probably going to be one of your bigger faces on SmackDown. He can be the next Kurt Angle. He legitimately can be the next Kurt Angle, and we've been saying this from day one when Kurt was coming out with a illegitimate son. It needed to be Chad Gable. It still could be Chad Gable. They could still bring that storyline back. Or at least let Kurt Angle come back and mentor him or something. But I think he's got a really bright future, man. Like, the guy can wrestle. The guy just needs to find his character. He's goofy. He likes to have fun. He just needs to stop looking like he's gonna cry. Like, I feel like every time he's upset, he looks like he's gonna cry.
Yeah, it's true.
But I'm all in on Gable, man. Like, that guy for a quote unquote short guy can wrestle.
Now, at the beginning of King of the Ring, I mean, I gave him a lot of shit. I glossed over him, but he has turned my eye.
Well, I think that somewhere Steven the Boss Hill is smiling because Chad Gable's getting so much love from you guys. Still not getting a whole lot of love from me. I'm not saying he's not a good wrestler, but his character ain't really doing anything for me. So, hey, there needs
coming up a little short.
You better watch out. Gable's getting ready to kick your door down and beat your ass, Chris.
I got King Corbin on my pocket.
So my next thing on Raw here, and when I watched this on Raw, I thought, oh, this is something that Chris talked about, and he probably hates that it happened the way that it happened.
Yep.
And it is Carmella winning the 24/7 championship.
Yep.
And it's because of how clunky the pacing of that title switch was.
Yep.
The promo was just like, it got to it and then it happened, and I'm like, oh, well, that's what Chris wanted to happen, but I don't think he wanted it to happen that way.
I think they must have missed the week we talked about it on the podcast, and then went back and listened to our podcast, because you can do that on iTunes or tune in. And they came back and they listened to it and they went, oh man, that's a good idea. And they were just late to the game, and they tried to push it and figure it out. And here we are with Carmella rolling up R-Truth, which was great. But again, to James's point, clunky. And I love all the women now chasing. I mean, that's hilarious to me, that like the men don't know if they can roll up Carmella. It'd be pretty hilarious if they mix in Corey Graves into the mix with this storyline now. If Corey Graves could somehow pin his girlfriend, if they do like a
Mr. 24/7.
Yeah.
Well, I would just be interested if they would go that angle with Graves and Carmella after all the stuff Graves went through. I don't know. It would just be interesting to see it go that way.
I mean, it is the 24/7 championship. It kind of flows through everyone eventually, right?
I mean, how many off WWE people have we had already that have won like the title? Like what, 3 or 4?
Yeah, we've had there was a
guy from Fox Sports or something, the basketball player. I mean, if you throw Kane in there, he is WWE, but not really right now.
Kane was never the 24/7 championship holder. Mayor
he
Glenn,
didn't win it that night?
Mayor Glenn Jacobs was.
True. Very true. Sorry.
Yeah. I still think they are missing an opportunity to let Mick Foley win the 24/7 title as 3 different people in one night. Like, that to me is a great way to bring Mick Foley back, who brought out that ugly ass belt, and let him win the belt as Dude Love, let him win the belt as Mankind, let him win the belt as Cactus Jack, and lose the belt somehow to himself in multiple sequences in the back or something. It'd be hilarious. Or just, I don't know. There's got to be a way to do it. I love the way the 24/7 title has changed the way we watch wrestling, changed the way we watch a title match. I think it's really interesting how it's on social media all the time. I think they're doing a great job. It's been one of the best things that WWE's done in a long time. But again, they did not do the Carmella angle right. There was so many better opportunities for Carmella to roll them up. I mean, even having Alexa Bliss win it when they had that run in at Clash of Champions would have been so much better than the way they did it I think they were just quickly trying to make the title move to Carmella, and that was the only thing they could think of. It was like a rewrite almost.
The only thing I really liked about it was that inevitable thing of that title switching over. Although you have to like, I guess, push logic out of your brain for a second, because obviously she's a woman. She pins a man. She gets the belt. Where there's all these guys who could have just like jumped in and pinned her real quick or whatever. But when it changes and then all of a sudden that like herd of women come running out, like,
It's awesome.
I thought that was cool. I was like, oh,
that was great.
That's nifty that, we had this huge cast of men and then all of a sudden, oh, here come all the women because now the woman holds the title.
I liked it when R-Truth tried to jump on her back and have her carry him, and then they were like, oh no, that's not going to work. But so other than the Kanellis, OBGYN thing where she was on the table and he pinned her, has every single change been a roll-up?
Except for Briscoe. Yeah. Everybody's.
I mean,
they've already done the sleeping
if he went down
spot,
on the ground,
they?
I don't think he'd be able to get up.
Didn't they already do the sleeping spot though? That would have.
Yeah,
Jinder. That would have been
in that airplane. So like
Jinder
3 out of the 20 some odd title changes, everything's been.
That in itself is a little bit sad. That's what makes the hardcore title a little bit more appealing, right? Because it's not just always roll up. Sometimes it's just, you get knocked the hell out and then you get the title at that point.
It'll be interesting to see how they go forward with it, because it's they're changing it with the Carmella thing now. They give it a different look for a little while. Can they keep it fresh? Can they keep this 24/7 title thing rolling with, pun intended, the roll up? That's the only way everybody keeps getting pinned.
Well, what's going to happen when they do the draft and sides are chosen? The 24/7 championship is going to be just on one show.
That'd be a mistake.
I think that'd be
a complete mistake.
If they did it, it kind of kills the whole bit of it. But again, how do you, like, if everything's going to be its own separate entity, how are you going to do it then?
You can't. You shouldn't. The whole entity thing it
bothers everybody on this podcast. I feel.
You finally blurred the lines between where people are, what show they're on. You got rid of the wild card dumb rule. You just let wrestlers show up whenever they're going to show up. You let the crowd not even know who's going to be there. You let the viewers not even know who's going to show up. It kept wrestling, fresh every single night. And now you're just going to go back to nope, these people are only on this show. It's the wrong move. It's 100% the wrong move. I understand these are people. I understand there's cost to flying around the country, but you could still do it creatively. You could still let people show up or not show up. To Jimmy's point that he's done a million times, people don't need to be there every week. Use a couple people this week, a couple people next week. Make us look for them, want them. Just putting them on one show and one show only is, I think, going to hurt the product.
I agree. It's and it'll be interesting to see what they do with a lot of these storylines that have been going on right now that kind of meld between, both shows, SmackDown and Raw. I mean, even throwing like the Street Profits in there because they've kind of been on Raw and like a little bit of NXT here and there lately. It'll be interesting to see what they kind of do. But I love the 24/7 championship, and I'm a little worried about it right now. I don't know if it's going to be as fun going forward in 2 or 3 weeks.
I mean, they would have to have it change hands on social media, and it would change hands to somebody on the other show. And that's how you move it from show to show. The idea that it's changing hands off TV, which is fine. I mean, I'm okay with that too.
I mean, it brings the more interactive, interactivity to it, being it on live TV and then on social media. So I could see that. But again, I mean, I feel, WWE and Fox, they want to have everything be separate going forward. So it'll
I
be
think that separation though can be used as a good thing in booking of something like Survivor Series. It makes
definitely.
Survivor Series a hell of a lot more compelling.
Well, and we were talking about that not too long ago about, man, what are they going to do with Survivor Series since everything is so kind of mishmash? You don't have these guys against those guys. So yeah, you're right.
Yeah, but here's my issue. Are we having a draft and separating everybody just so we can have matches at Survivor Series? Are we doing a complete restructure for one pay-per-view? For 1 month essentially of build up and matches. Why not just build factions and let factions fight each other? Why not just build an NXT versus everybody faction? Why not build a fiend, Funhouse versus somebody? Why not build the Bludgeon Brothers up against, Daniel Bryan and Rowan and I'm sorry, Daniel Bryan and Reigns and two other people? You could build little factions to still have good traditional Survivor Series matches. You don't need to have a full draft for it.
It would be stupid, detrimental, idiotic if Survivor Series is the reason that they are doing a draft. It would be dumb.
I mean, it's got to be one of the reasons. I mean, it's happening before Survivor Series, and it's happening with enough time before Survivor Series for them to build that. But I can make a card right now with just storylines, building it towards factions to have a good card at Survivor Series. There's plenty that you can do. I mean, you got King Corbin and his court. It'd be so simple. And then you could have Chad Gable build a team. And there you go. Like, there's a match. You could have the 4 horsewomen on 2 on each side, and each one of them get 2 more people for a match. You could have the Kabuki Warriors go up against Rose and Deville and build 2 more people onto that match. There's so many different ways you can build foursomes that would be good matches at Survivor Series. You could have an old school traditional Survivor Series with a bunch of 4-on-4s or more and a couple of title matches. It'd be so great.
Yeah, I mean, the OC against the Viking Raiders,
there you go.
And the Viking
they probably
Raiders
take like Ricochet. Yeah,
they
pick up Ricochet.
Cedric
probably.
Alexander and Ricochet, and the Viking Raiders versus the OC, and throw in one more.
It's so doable, and they're gonna draft and just watch what the card ends up being after the draft for Survivor Series and what traditional matches we get, and we can have a conversation on this podcast and talk about what could have made it better and how many different matches we could have made in a 1 month period to just have a really good Survivor Series.
Does NXT need to be involved in Survivor Series in some way, shape, or form against one of the SmackDown, Raw, and
I think having the main Survivor Series match being a constant 3-way match with SmackDown, Raw, and NXT sounds spectacular to me. I think they should do it.
I think that's a way to do it. I think there's also an interesting way to do it with having NXT UK go up against NXT in a match at Survivor Series, giving them one match on the card where it's Imperium
setting
versus,
up for that kind of.
Yeah. So, I mean, that'd be interesting too. Like, you don't necessarily need to have them up against Raw and SmackDown. You could let that be a tease going forward somehow.
Is there a takeover though? Is there a takeover?
I have not heard a takeover yet. I don't know. So usually, I mean, it's one of the big 4, so you would assume. But what are they doing next year? Next year, we're not going to have a takeover before the Rumble. They're not advertising any takeover right now before the Royal Rumble. So maybe they're going to start that trend early and not have one before Survivor Series.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's talk about some women wrestling. We've got a handful.
By
of
the way,
matches.
no takeover scheduled before Survivor Series. If what I'm looking at in front of me is correct, I think the next one's in December.
Interesting.
What's in December?
Like, so it's just a one-off takeover in December?
It says NXT Takeover Revolution on December. No, hold on. I'm an idiot. Time out. Chuck is an idiot. Let's
Chuck's
just
an
get that out there
idiot.
right now.
Butt scratcher.
Butt scratcher.
I'm a dumbass. That's your title today. Chuck is a dumbass. November 23rd, NXT Takeover War Games.
War Games.
Yeah, there's your Imperium spot.
Yeah, I'm thinking so. Unless it's Undisputed Era, which is a little bit more compelling.
Yeah, I mean, either way, they can make it compelling either way. It'll be interesting.
But I also would love to see Undisputed Era as the Survivor Series team
Against anyone.
Doesn't matter who the opponents are. I think the crowd would just love that crap, man.
Well, the best opponents would be the OC. The OC versus the Undisputed Era would be the best storyline and the best opponents you can go after right now. But you need to add one more person to the OC, and I don't know if Finn Balor's ready to come back.
So, Raw.
Ooh, that's how you fix Hell in the Cell.
What's that?
That's how you fix Hell in the Cell. I think we talked about this. I don't know why I forgot about it. You bring back Finn Balor at the end of that match in Hell in the Cell, and it's a no contest because Finn Balor, the lights go out. You think it's the Fiend turning the lights out. Rollins disappears, and in the ring is Finn Balor as the demon standing toe-to-toe with the Fiend.
I love it.
That's how you end the show.
Write it in. WWE.
That's how you fix it. That's how the Fiend doesn't lose. That's how the title doesn't change hands. And that's how you continue that feud that we started in the beginning with the Fiend with Finn Balor.
Are we billing that to be the main match at both Rumble? I'm trying to get the timing down, so it would be probably at Rumble and WrestleMania? Because you would want one to go to no contest and then one to have a winner?
No, I would just you'd have to decide how quickly he goes to the demon. I mean, it would save it at Hell in the Cell, unless he just comes in as Balor. I mean, he could make the lights go out and the lights come back on and be Balor in the ring. He doesn't have to be the demon. You know, he could utilize the demon power, right?
We've talked about that before, right? So what if you so using your thought process, right? You have Balor go into the ring, and then suddenly Rollins has disappeared entirely. He's just not there anymore. Yeah. And then Balor sits there and looks at him, and the Fiend is like prepping to attack him, and right when he goes to attack him, the lights go out again, and then he disappears, and then you just, that's how you end the show, with the Fiend kind of looking like, what the hell's going on? And then the lights get really low, and then you just hear the heartbeat.
Heartbeat. Yeah.
That's definitely a way to save it, for sure. Maybe the best way that we've talked about saving it.
We'll see what happens. We'll see if they listened.
But at this point, that being said, even if they do that, I'm still of the mindset that take your time with it. Like, you can kind of bring him back and have him fix that storyline, but then take your time. Like, in the meantime, Bray Wyatt, for God's sakes, go after Randy Orton. Please.
Yeah. That's how you get him to SmackDown.
Yeah.
That's how you move him over quickly.
Okay, so we had a pretty fair bit of women's wrestling this week. The first major match being Banks beating Nikki Cross.
I know you love that match because you love Nikki Cross.
Well, yeah, I mean, I love Banks, and Nikki Cross is, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's good that she's in a tag team because I don't find her believable as a singles wrestler.
And it's fun to see her kind of go from regular Nikki Cross to crazy Nikki Cross every once in a while. I mean,
The match was fine.
depending
It
on
was good.
who she's paired up. It's who she's paired up with. We've always said that. You know, she's believable with the person that, and when she's paired up with a person that can make her look believable. When she wrestles Lacey Evans, it's not believable.
The problem was this, right? Is it seems like it's the yin and yang of like the WWE is that you have a match with Banks and Cross, and it's an okay match, right? And so since we had a decent match there, we have to have a bad match. And the problem is the bad match is Lacey Evans over Ember Moon, which was just why does the WWE hate Ember Moon so much? I don't get it. She's got so much talent. It's like, quite honestly, I would be happy to see Ember Moon get moved back down to NXT, you know, or moved over to any other show where she's going to get more opportunities than being fed to Lacey Evans, who, because she took so much time off, has lost a lot of the, you know, she's lost a lot of it. So she's still kind of getting herself back at this point, and it's not pretty.
And it wasn't even a good match, in my opinion, either. I mean,
save like maybe one spot that Ember Moon had off of the apron or whatever.
Yeah, they looked very. Their chemistry was not good together in the ring.
Well, it's just interesting because it's like you need. I mean, I get Evans winning because she's, you know, building this rivalry with Natalya, but at the expense of Moon, it doesn't make much sense. And we go back to the draft a little bit, and it's like, well, maybe the draft will be helpful for some of these women because maybe it will change some of the storylines and change some of the opportunities for some of the women right now, because you got people that aren't even on TV for a month. You know, you got Naomi, who I haven't seen forever. Yeah. So it'd be interesting to see if they got switched up a little bit and drafted around, and maybe that'll help.
Then we have a little bit of tag team action across some of these shows. You have Banks and Bayley over Carmella and Charlotte, which was an interesting kind of like half step back kind of a moment towards the end of that match, because Banks and Bayley win, and then all the women come out to take Carmella's title, so Truth grabs Carmella and runs off, and then you have all of a sudden Banks and Bayley being able to gang up on Charlotte, only to have Becky come in for the save. So we haven't totally thrown away our tea time abilities, which is a good thing. I'm still enjoying Banks and Bayley as heels.
I don't know. Is it believable every time Bayley gets like manhandled by Bliss? Like how Bliss is like beating her up on the outside of the ring. Like she's supposed to be the SmackDown champion. Like Bliss is just taking care of her with no issue. I feel like they're almost squashing Bayley a little bit in this storyline, where it's like Banks is powerful, but Bayley is a wimp almost. You know, Bayley's got to cheat now to win. She used to be the champion, and now she has to cheat to win. That's a quick turn.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. It was... all these matches have been okay. I mean, I don't know that any of them have been epically bad, except for maybe the Evans Moon one. And I don't even know if that was epically bad. It's just I just disagree with the booking choices. We also have the Kabuki Warriors came back, and they beat Fire and Desire, which I just don't know. Because I was kind of on board with Fire and Desire, as a concept and them. I don't know. We talk about Bailey cheating. I almost feel like Fire and Desire need to cheat. Like, get some wins.
It is a good way to push the Kabuki Warriors, though. I mean, get them back into the conversation. It's a decent win for them because that's probably the top two true tag teams that we got going right now. I mean, they both have good chemistry together. They both do some interesting moves as a tag team. Again, it goes back to the fact that the tag titles for the women are just not properly utilized. They're not building storylines. They're not building tag teams. I don't know if they have any interest to build tag teams. I think it's forever just going to be this mishmash of characters every once in a while tagging to go up against whoever the tag champions are at the time.
Yeah.
Another belt that there's only one of that once people get drafted to SmackDown or Raw, it could just be on one show.
But I would argue that's the one time where I'll go, that belt will benefit. It will benefit because you'll be forced to put tag teams on that show. You'll be forced to create tag teams and put tag teams wherever they might be, because there's a couple of tag teams forming in NXT right now with some of the new women coming in to the Performance Center. There's an opportunity to build some tag teams up and put them on the show where the tag belts are. So that would be the one time where I'm like, okay, keeping them on one show might help, just because of how poorly it's been done so far.
Do they do the stupid thing and have a Raw?
The answer is yes.
SmackDown's
sorry.
Tag Team Championship.
No. So yeah, probably they will.
I agree. I hope they don't do it because they can't even do it with one title, and doing it with two titles, I mean, it would be
there's not enough
such
women.
a phenomenal just shit in the bucket.
They barely can do it with the men's titles because they just don't
True.
care about them.
Yeah, like it sometimes you have to remind yourself who's the tag champions on Raw and SmackDown.
The women's matches on NXT were a little bit more one-sided, but I think both important. So we had Rhea Ripley showing her dominance this week, and that's just important from the standpoint of, Rhea Ripley's awesome, and people need
Jimmy's
to know
got
this.
A crush.
People need to know
Jimmy's
this.
got a new crush.
And then the return of Dakota Kai, which is excellent. Welcome back.
It was good. It wasn't a great match. She seemed a little rusty, but it was good to see her back in the ring. Man, that knee brace is big. It's a big knee brace for a little girl.
Yeah. But that is the extent of the women's wrestling this week. Definitely has its issues. They're working on the tag teams, but it really needs some help still. So keep plugging away, WWE, because
oh man, I'll say it again. I think I said it last week, and it hurts me every time I say it. But where are the Iconics? The women's division needs them back. They need those annoying women back. No, Billie Kay was out there. She was chasing after 24/7 title. I'm 100% certain I saw her chasing after a 24/7 title. Peyton's out. I think her and Dillinger got married, so I think they were out on a honeymoon or whatever, or vacation, or maybe just taking a break. But Peyton needs to come back. We need the Iconics back. We need them mixed back into the tag titles quickly.
I need to hear that shrieking Iconic noise, every time.
They'll get a good pop for it. Think about it. They'll get a really good pop for it if they just show up on a pay-per-view or something.
I need more impressions of all the different female wrestlers from Peyton Royce and Billie Kay, because all of their impressions are amazing.
So stupid.
It's always the worst impression ever.
So stupid.
But I love that. I love that shtick. So, so the rest of Raw that we didn't cover, Mysterio wins a 5-man match to be the number 1 contender to face Rollins on Monday. So he's facing Rollins on Monday for the title, which seems like an obvious setup of the fact that Ray is a active wrestler, but also a legend, so is likely to get destroyed by the Fiend.
Yeah. Because, I mean, that's basically what he's been doing, right? He's been doing the Randy Orton thing of taking out legends or veterans or whatever you want to call it. So
the only other
seems like a setup.
Yeah. The only other notes I have here kind of push towards the fact that what we were talking about earlier, that be careful, don't use the Fiend too much, because you have an episode of Firefly Funhouse where the puppets really do enjoy Seth Rollins, and they don't want to see Seth Rollins get hurt by the Fiend, and then Bray starts to get angry, and then Rollins and Strowman's match being interrupted by the Fiend at the end of that show.
How about the interaction between Strowman and Bray on social media, the back and forth that they had on Twitter? Just the idea that, you know, Bray apologizes to Strowman, and Strowman says, you know, I'm not the guy you found so long ago, and Bray comes back and says, neither am I. You know, just and I think Bray made one comment, you know, just believe in like the end result, or the, you know, just trust me, essentially. It's interesting because it's almost like a tease towards maybe at some point they'll bring the family back together, or maybe at some point there's a bigger story here, and maybe it's not about, like you said, the title. Maybe he's not after the title. Maybe he's after something else. You know, maybe this is ultimately leading him to a Roman Reigns. You know, he's just working his way up his past to just get back to Reigns, because that was the feud, besides Finn Balor. That was the feud that we kind of wanted to get back to. So I'm wondering where we're going. I'm wondering how quickly we're getting there. And again, to your point, I feel like we got to be careful about how fast they're moving this.
Yeah, I wonder with that all said, is if it's a situation where the way that you book that match then is that you just have it be the Fiend versus Seth Rollins, and maybe you even have Rollins get the upper hand for a little bit, but then Braun Strowman's music hits, and you build it in a way where you think Strowman's coming out there to get some revenge on the Fiend. He busts into that Hell in a Cell, you know, cage, and then he gets there and he's about to attack the Fiend, and then the Fiend kind of, you know, like goes over to him and like puts his hand on his shoulder or something like that, and then Braun just turns and starts beating the hell out of Rollins, and that's how you end the pay-per-view.
Puts his hand on his ear, and it puts the, you know, the fact that it's speaking to him, right?
Yeah.
So it puts the hand on the ear, and Strowman kind of just tweaks his head, and all of a sudden just goes AWOL on Rollins. But then couldn't he pin him, and then couldn't he win the title? Ugh. Like, I don't want him to win the title.
Does he care about winning matches?
Does he care about the title? I mean, that's the thing. I keep going back to this. I don't like the idea of the Fiend being the champion, because it makes no sense to chase the Fiend. Everyone should be afraid of him. I love Rollins recently just doing the weird yell in the corner because he's so scared of the Fiend. It's awesome. That's what you need.
You know, it's an interesting thing, because you talk about Bray being on this quest where he is, in a sense, trying to destroy everything that has caused him issues in his past or whatever. Well, what if he treats the title the same way? He doesn't want it, but he wants to destroy anybody that has it. And maybe he even wants to destroy. Maybe he wins the Universal title only to destroy it.
So it's
a good way of changing the way that title looks too.
I don't know. They're interested in doing that. I don't think they're interested in changing the way titles look. They could have done that a bunch of times with a bunch of different titles, and I feel like they just haven't even bothered.
Why isn't the WWE Championship title not blue?
that's the one that they decided not to make. Well, the Universal title wasn't red because it was going to be only on Raw. That's because it was just a really poor choice of strap color, and then you had to change the color to something, I guess. The WWE has not been creative with titles in the recent history of of what we've seen.
They're
Basically, we've seen
terrible.
different straps. We've seen the freaking Waffle House Mountain Dew. I'm sorry, Waffle House 7-Up 24/7 title. It just they have not been creative with the way they've made titles look. Even the cruiserweight title isn't great. The purple, it was better with a black strap, to be honest. So I don't know. The NXT is the only one I think that the new title was better than the old title. I like the new NXT title, and that was not done because of them worried about how it looks. That was done because of what was going on at the time with the NXT women's title. But I don't know. I'd need to hear more about it and how he would destroy it. Just because what would come out of that? Do we get a new title out of that? A new look out of that?
Well, I'm not even saying that he wins the title to destroy the title. Just saying he destroys Seth Rollins and then he destroys his title.
And then Rollins is still the champion, but he walks around with no title? Or you have to give him a different title?
Well, you can make that into a storyline within itself. I mean, that's a way of introducing a new belt. I don't know that that's necessary. Like you said, I don't know that that's necessary, that they even want to do that.
No, we're brainstorming, right?
But I'm not opposed to the idea, but it requires there to be a little bit more movement in the title for Bray to have something against, at least on the side, have something against anybody who holds the title. Not because he has a hatred for them, but because he has a hatred for the title.
The thing that he was never able to really get. He got it one time, and it really didn't get a great run. So yeah.
Other matches that probably we'll just want to touch on for a second. I don't know that I want to complain another week on the same thing, but Nakamura over Ali. Okay. Whatever, WWE. You know what? You do what you're gonna do. At this
I
point.
don't know. I know you're upset by it because I know you love Ali. I think Ali still looked like Ali. I mean, he almost looked like a freaking scorpion when he folded himself up there when he jumped to the outside. But it's like I think if you have an end result with this Nakamura Sammy team, and it's something interesting like we talked about with Morrison and The Miz, like as long as you're building them up to have something interesting at the end, I'm fine with them beating the other guys.
You guys keep saying that as like an interesting thing though, and I don't know that I'm buying that as an interesting match. I don't know that I care about that match. And I love John Morrison, but I don't know that I care about anything that face Miz has to do with anything.
Yeah, but that's a way to get Morrison to that heel Morrison that you want. Yeah, I don't disagree, right? I agree that Miz is a better heel than a face. But you said it, as long as he has this TV show, he's a face. Yeah. He's not going to be a heel anytime soon. So let's just ride that. And if we can take Morrison, mix him in, make everyone think that they're back together, that their faces together, and then Morrison turns on Miz at some point, you get your Morrison heel that he's been so good at, the dirtbag that he's been on the other shows.
Yeah. New Day against the B team. That's not worth talking about. Bryan and Reigns teaming up to go up against Luke Harper and Eric Rowan.
Loved it. By the way, shout out to Luke Harper for wearing the Hatebreed shirt. I love
Hatebreed loved it too.
I know. I tweeted to them and they retweeted it. I was like, yeah, boy.
I don't love this storyline. And I will love it if I'm wrong. In that, and I think I talked about this last week, the problem is I'm just not buying as much as Daniel Bryan puts people over, and as much as Roman Reigns puts people over, I'm just not buying them as a tag team losing this match. So if they don't lose this match, then it needs to be hella close, or what was the point of Luke Harper, Eric Rowan?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let's be honest. Rowan is getting the wins. Rowan is getting a lot of push here, and I don't know if we talked about it, but it just seems like for some reason WWE is giving him a push right now as a big man, and he's got a win over Reigns, and he now has a win over Daniel Bryan.
Yeah, but it's a push to what end? Is it a push to the end that they're going to win?
I don't know. We have to wait and see. I mean, I see what you're concerned about. I mean, I definitely history would say that obviously Rowan's not going to be the big name on SmackDown and get all these wins and end up winning in the end. But I don't know. They could surprise us, and if they do, and they really are backing Rowan, I'd buy him as just a big, bulky bad guy. I mean, he's not terrible as a wrestler. And he's been better on the mic lately. So I'd be fine with Rowan getting this big push and it being legitimate.
Well, then the last thing we had on SmackDown was KO and Shane McMahon are going to have a match for their careers on SmackDown.
It is the end of Shane McMahon on TV for a while.
Yep, it's what it's looking like for sure.
I'm just so uninterested in this, unfortunately, as much as I love KO. I don't know. I feel like this is too late. I mean, one, we've done it already. We've had a Hell in the Cell match with these two.
Yep.
We've had this career match. We've had this you're fired.
Yep.
I don't know. I think they dragged it out about a month too long. I think they should have either let KO just go away for a little bit and come back and built this up towards the Hell in the Cell pay-per-view like they wanted to. Maybe he was on TV a little bit too much before it. I'll go back to what we've talked about multiple times. Maybe guys don't need to be on TV every week to keep a storyline going. Maybe we could have just let him go away and then come back, a week or two before it and built it up.
Well, this definitely feels like one of those SmackDown matches that ends up not working out and becomes a pay-per-view match. Same as the Brock match.
Yeah. Like it doesn't make sense for it to be. I don't know. They're trying to make SmackDown premiere pretty big. I don't know.
So I think one of them goes to Hell in the Cell and one of them goes to completion. And I guess if I were a betting man, I would say that Brock Lesnar's going to win the title on Friday. And he's not going to be in Hell in the Cell because Hell in the Cell, it's Brock Lesnar, and Hell in the Cell is a B pay-per-view compared to the A pay-per-views. And that because it's Hell in the Cell, Shane McMahon needs to be in Hell in the Cell so he can try to kill himself like he always does. So it makes sense that would be the one that somehow would get pushed off to Hell in the Cell.
I don't know. I can't believe they're not going to have the title. How are you not going to have the world title at the pay-per-view? You've gone through this
should have a universal
for a year with Brock Lesnar. I don't know. But and we're talking about the universal title and really not even meaning anything on it, right? Like we're not even wanting it to move or be a big part of the storyline.
It's a B pay-per-view. It never matters.
It should not be.
Hell
in the Cell should be
switch very often.
I mean, I don't need it to be an A pay-per-view because it's Hell in the Cell, but it should at least be like, better than B. It needs to be an A minus. Hell in the Cell is a good pay-per-view. It's kind of like Money in the Bank. It's kind of like TLC. Like these are pay-per-views that should be good because they have good stipulations.
But they don't typically switch main titles like that on Hell in a Cell, though. You'll see other titles switch over, but not the main ones.
Yeah, like Clash.
The other thing is they have a lot to announce for that pay-per-view because there's only 3 matches that are even on the card right now. And it's in a week.
Yeah, they're going to be building up pretty quickly this week.
This all the premieres like on the Raw premiere and then SmackDown now on Friday this week. I mean, it's just like there's so much crap going on, and like you don't even know what's going on in the pay-per-view.
It's going to be a sprint to the finish. And they've done that before. We've had, I believe we've had the same discussion earlier this year on other pay-per-views where it's like they only have 1 or 2 matches and they have to build all these matches up, and there's no promo to the match. There's no build-up storyline. It's just these two. I think it was a Lashley somebody match. I think it was Lashley and Balor, right? Or Lashley and the Demon. That's what it was. And we were like, oh, okay, it's just Lashley versus the Demon. And that's the storyline. The fact that we're telling you that's the match. So it's going to be the same thing this week. It's going to be, remember this storyline? Yep, this is a match now.
That was the easiest match to pick ever, though.
What are you talking about, man? He had those different contacts in. It was scary.
NXT, things we haven't touched on. Grimes over Mendoza. Grimes continues to get his push. Kushida and Breezango over Imperium.
Good pop for Breezango. They looked rusty, but good pop.
They'll get there. Birch and Lorcan over Everrise.
I like Birch and Lorcan a lot, but I think they had their push when they had that really great takeover match with Undisputed. And I don't know, they're kind of going back and forth with Lorcan being by himself or not. So they put on a great match. Their characters are very vanilla, I think is the best way to put it.
But these last 2 matches are definitely worth talking about. I'm going to save what I think is probably the best one for last. So first we'll talk about Matt Riddle over Killian Dane, which I would say the match is fine. It's more about the building of a story of Matt Riddle versus Adam Cole.
Yeah, I feel like they used Killian Dane to build Riddle back up into the title picture.
Yes.
Which I think, again, a missed opportunity when Riddle had that amazing match at TakeOver against Velveteen, I believe.
Velveteen Dream.
Yeah. Missed opportunity there to build Riddle up to that point. I think it'd be better to have Riddle face Gargano or something and build him up that way. And push Gargano back down, not necessarily push him off the card, but at least just put him on a losing streak or something to get him frustrated. But again, Gargano is going to come back and squash Shane Thorne next week, or this week.
But maybe the best match of the night: Keith Lee versus Djokovic.
I know you're saying it wrong, and I don't even know how to say it right. It's like 6 syllables.
Djokovic. I don't know.
Oh, the way they say it on the broadcast is awesome. They're totally going to change his name soon. There's no way Vince lets that keep going because it's like Tommaso Ciampa. Like they made it Ciampa because he was tired of people being like Mamasa. Like they couldn't like say his name.
Yeah.
But
well, I'm butchering it, but the matches are amazing.
Magic.
Lee is a beast.
Both of them. I give them both credit 100%. You can't just
it was
don't take it away from either guy.
No.
Yes, I agree. Keith Lee is the star of this, and holy cow, the things he can do as a big man.
Dude, a moonsault off the second rope. And then dude, he's 300 something pounds.
The corkscrew twist thing over the top rope. Just the fact that he can leapfrog over the guy is amazing to me. And I love he's got a similar move that Rowan has where he basically just throws his body lateral at you and just crushes you. And it looks awesome. He's great. And he's a nice guy too.
Yeah. We met Keith Lee. He was a good guy.
Bask in his glory. I like the character. I think he's a good wrestler. It's interesting because if you go back and watch the match, it's a very slow match. It's a very timed-wise, slow-moving match from one move to another. And I think we complain about that sometimes, but I think it's more believable when you're dealing with big men. when you're dealing with big men, it's like, okay, I get it. There's a lot in each one of these moves. There's a lot of strain. There's a lot of power involved in these moves. So from one move to another, you don't have to keep moving so quickly. Where if it's a Gargano match, if it's a Cole match, you expect the speed to keep up. So it's interesting how you can do a lot of the same spots with different pairs of people, and the pacing of it can be different, and it can still work.
Well, that was all of wrestling this week. Obviously, it gets a little bit busier next week as we have Fox going to Fridays and we have AEW starting on Wednesday nights.
It's going to be really difficult. I mean, I got hockey season starting up soon.
It's a lot of
now
wrestling.
I got it's crazy.
Yeah.
You know what else is crazy, and this is something that I wanted to speak on this week. They have made some serious changes to the broadcast teams.
Oh yeah,
big time.
And I'm okay with most of them. I understand the situation where you're bringing your quote unquote A team to SmackDown. Renee and Cole and Graves are now the SmackDown announcers, and I get that.
I think Renee is done.
Yeah, I think Renee.
She's not going to SmackDown.
No, she was announced for SmackDown. They showed the picture of the three of them. They on social media they have the picture of what three are on SmackDown, what three are on Raw, what three are on NXT, and in 205 Live. So you see the threesomes on every show. Renee is part of that three.
I think she's going to be gone sooner than later from that announced team on SmackDown.
Well, I think that's the wrong move, but that is another layer to it. Bringing back Jerry the King Lawler to Raw and putting him as a Raw announce, I get the nostalgia. I get bring it back every once in a while. I hope it's temporary. I've enjoyed the announce teams the way they've been. Graves' interaction on both shows have been amazing. Graves, I think, is the best announcer you have right now. So putting him on SmackDown, I'm fine with. But putting Lawler on Raw, like we're supposed to believe that he's just back and there.
Temporary. Definitely temporary.
It better be temporary.
Do you have the announcement? Do you have that so I can see exactly what you're talking about? Who was announced?
Yeah, I could.
Which one?
I'll have to pull it up, but yeah.
See now, and I read from
talk amongst yourselves. I'll find it.
Yeah, I read from her Twitter that she said she was happy about doing like that backstage show and not doing the commentary anymore. I mean, I forget where I read so much stuff during the week, and I never write down or notate where I read it from, but I was pretty sure that she was not going to be on SmackDown.
Yeah, I remembered that they had been talking about that though for sure. So I am backing Chuck a little bit in that rumor, but I'm just not sure if that was going to be a done deal or not. I mean, obviously, if you put her on SmackDown and that gives her X amount of days, she should be able to do both programs. It depends on how they're doing backstage. Is it a totally taped show? Is it a more of a live show? What is it covering? I mean, if it's just covering everything that's happened, in WWE and whatnot, it's definitely interesting if she's paired up with somebody like CM Punk. That's an interesting dynamic within itself.
Well, so I'll have to find the image and show you guys before next week, but I did find the article, and they reference her as a special contributor. Okay. So not necessarily as the third person on the announcement.
Backstage, I think.
Yeah, so it's special contributor, but it doesn't. I'll have to go back and grab the images because they released on social media kind of almost like a headshot thing where it's like, here's the Raw people, here's the SmackDown people, and she was part of the threesome there on SmackDown. And I don't even know who the third guy on Raw was. I'd never
I
recognized him
see
before.
it as this. It says, according to WWE, the announced teams going forward are as follows. On Raw, you will have Vic Joseph, Dio Madden, and Jerry Lawler. And on Friday Night SmackDown, you'll have Michael Cole and Corey Graves.
Yeah, that's the one that
I've
I
read
read.
that article as well, but again, there was a social media post, and I'm going to try to find it before we sign off here to show you guys.
I'm
but
wondering, like,
I don't agree with it. Let's put it that way.
should we be open to the idea of because at this point you have Beth Phoenix on NXT. You had Renee Young on Raw. Is Charlie Caruso ready to do announcing?
They were possible, and this is something I read too. Going back to the Raw stuff, they were talking about possibly having Mickey James be one of the announcers on Raw.
She actually got some time on Main Event apparently, where she did a little bit of announcing.
Yeah. I don't know. It should be interesting. So, but as we close this episode out, I'm interested. With all these changes going on, I wanna hear something that you guys would like to see, moving forward with this whole separation of SmackDown and Raw. It could be on either show. Just one thing that you really hope that WWE does or maybe doesn't do with all this big separation.
I mean, for me, I would say it's probably the utilization of all the talent that they have. I mean, between the 3 shows, they have a huge roster of wrestlers. And I mean, we've talked about it before about, how many people we actually see, how many people we never see, how many people are in the background or in, little interludes like with the 24/7 championship. I think it's going to come down. I mean, what I would like to see is basically more people getting in the fray and not, using guys like what we talked about earlier, EC3 as a squash for Rusev to bring him back into the mix, and actually, developing, some of these guys a little bit more on TV to use, because I mean, we love seeing all these old guys come back and, for nostalgia purposes, if they can still do it. But I mean, EC3 is a fairly young guy. Some of these, we talked about Breezango, like it was good to see them on NXT again. But yeah, it'll be, for me, it's getting these storylines out there, not overusing your star number 1 talent, and throwing in these other guys that you have in there, periodically. And that, like we said, you don't have to use everybody every week. It'll be nice to have these guys not be on 2 nights in a row, like we saw with Chad Gable this week, like we saw with The Miz, before the last pay-per-view. So it'll be nice to see how they can use everybody for me.
Yeah, that split separation is definitely interesting. Splitting the shows up by so many days, it definitely opens up the possibility of giving people a little bit of a rest if they're going to end up changing their mind and having people jump from show to show.
I just hope they let NXT stand on its own. I hope they continue to let NXT get pushed as the 3rd show. And if they're going to do this draft and include everybody, I mean, have they announced exactly if all 3 are going to get picks or if it's just going to be a Raw and SmackDown thing? I
don't know that they've gotten that deep into it. Just know that it's the draft starts on the 2nd official Raw. I mean, SmackDown on the Fox Network.
I think that would be my preference. Let's have all 3 shows get drafts, and the issue with that obviously is that would totally muddy up the NXT roster. maybe NXT gets a couple supplemental picks or something. I don't know. There's just a way to move guys in this draft to give them a second berth, and sending them to NXT like we've talked about. I think Chuck hit on all the major points otherwise, but I definitely want to see NXT continue to be the place where guys can reinvent themselves a little bit and continue to have better wrestling matches. And I hope they get away from this hour split that they've been doing on the network with NXT and USA.
They will.
They Doesn't that start this Wednesday?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that had to do with the final season of Suits on USA.
Yeah, so hurry up and get that over with so I can watch in one sitting NXT and not have to jump from one app to another. But otherwise, I'm not really interested in the draft. I'm not really caring about it. So maybe coming out of Hell in a Cell, they'll be able to make me care. But as of right now, I don't know. I'm really not into it. Other than what we talked about on this podcast, is it a way to build up to Survivor Series? And if that's all it's there for, then there's better ways to do it.
I think that my biggest observation, and what I would tell the WWE, and it sounds weird for me to say this because of how much I complain about all the different things that they do that I don't like, but what I'm going to say is I really just want WWE to just keep it up. Because when I really think about it, and you think about like back in, the Jinder Mahal as the champion days, like without any competition, WWE was all over the place. And now all of these things that they're doing, signing a new TV deal, bringing NXT up, there's a lot of different storylines that, are interesting. Now, the problem is some of them are on the precipice of like, okay, well, we know that WWE might screw this up, like your Eric Rowan, Luke Harper thing. But they haven't screwed it up yet. So...
Yet.
So keep it going, because I will say this, WWE wrestling has been the best that it has been for a while. Even with all the stuff that we come on, I mean, we have to. I mean, it's my job to be on this podcast and be critical of what they're doing. So I don't always agree with what they're doing, but that doesn't mean that the quality of wrestling has gone down or the quality of storyline has gone down. I don't always, they're always going to have those moments like where Lacey Evans beats Ember Moon, and was it really worth doing that? Was that really worth it? But they're starting to finally get a little bit. There are a few more extra storylines going that are at least semi-interesting, and you don't feel like they're focusing on that just one main storyline. Now, we still have situations where, like, again, the Fiend is single-handedly carrying Raw, and you just constantly have, Firefly Funhouse bits, every hour or whatever. They're never going to totally stop what they do. I mean, that's just what they do. That's their main storyline. They're going to have it carry through the whole episode. But with the King Corbin, Chad Gable storyline, with this Sasha Banks, Bayley, Charlotte, Becky Lynch tag team / also this Becky singles thing, they're pushing multiple storylines in a bunch of different directions, and it keeps it very watchable. They have the OC against the Viking Raiders, but you also have Cedric Alexander, against AJ Styles, and they're keeping that interesting. You've got Ali versus Nakamura with Sami Zayn, and they're staying committed to it. And I don't always like it, but it's not that it's not working. So I'm just happy that they're, I think, listening to this podcast a little more when we complain about, hey, don't focus on the two storylines that you've got going for yourself, and expand a little bit more. They're not totally utilizing their talent in the best way possible, as Chuck said. But I think I think they're going in the right direction. And I'm looking forward to seeing. I mean, I guess it's important to see this division go down, this draft go down, this star shakeup go down, and more importantly, AEW getting on television and hopefully really bringing it. Because if AEW can get on television and really bring it, and they start to get a good following, then all that's going to do is light a fire under WWE, and they're going to push to make the best product they possibly can. And they're going to make sure that their writing, is legitimate. And the issues that they have, hopefully, they'll be like, okay, well, we tried to do a last-second curveball and change a total storyline, and that really seemed to bomb the ratings, so we need to make sure we don't do that. So competition makes everything better, for sure.
One little tidbit to throw in there about AEW. AEW will be TV 14 when it premieres on Wednesday.
Game changing.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
I'll be watching a lot of AEW. I think that it's going to be difficult to watch every single bit of wrestling every single week, having being normal people that do a podcast.
You're going to have to utilize that DVR.
But I can promise you that amongst the group of us that we will have watched everything. And I will be watching AEW every single week. So I'll make sure that we keep AEW in mind for sure.
I think I called dibs on NXT and 205 Live.
Yeah, there you go. I apologize, 205 Live. I don't always have time for you, so I really just watch you when Chris tells me that I need to watch you.
That's what I'm here for.
So, but AEW, I'm committed to watching AEW, and obviously I'm committed to watching, God, I might actually watch Impact. We'll see. I don't know. I'm gonna see with them sliding into the Tuesday slot. I'm interested to see if they're gonna get their stuff together and really put out a product that's worth mentioning week to week. Because if it's not worth mentioning, I'm not gonna mention it.
Don't mention
it. Wow. Shots fired. But as usual, that's been our time here on the Bald Monkey Wrestling Podcast. Wherever and however you're listening, we appreciate you, and we hope that you'll pass along this podcast to people who love wrestling. Like, subscribe, any way that you're listening to this podcast.
Share.
Interact with us.
Sharing
Call us
caring.
an idiot. Call me an idiot. Say, Chuck,
yes,
you don't know
call
what the
Chuck
hell
an
you're
idiot. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't call Big Baby Jimmy an idiot. Call Chuck an idiot. So we will obviously next week is going to be a pretty crazy wrestling week with all of these shows premiering in different time slots and with AEW finally premiering. So there's going to be lots to talk about, and on top of all of that, oh my gosh, there's a pay-per-view next Sunday.
Cell picks.
And so we'll
Can
have
I
to do our
redeem
picks.
myself?
The answer is no.
Probably not.
It will be the continue of my reign. Yes, my peasants. King Tiro of picks.
Yeah.
Hey, you didn't win last time, so.
Yeah, he didn't win the pay-per-view.
I won the week.
He did. You did win the week. You did.
Well, the week of Tiro has expired. Yeah, and it's starting to rot in the refrigerator. So, we'll see. It's always fun to do picks, so it should be fun to get back into the jump of that, and maybe we can have the boss back on to do picks with us for sure. So, thank you everybody for listening. We'll see you next week.